Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. In 2021, political representation in the City Council changed. For the first time in history, the council's majority was female and a majority of women of color as well. And so a group that was called 21 in 21 was reformed into a new Majority NYC, an organization designed to keep the gains for women in the political landscape and then extend them into the future. Tonight, we examine what this shift in council demographic might mean for us in the Bronx and in the city. We've got two guests here with us in the studio. Please join me welcoming the Executive Director of New Majority NYC, Jessica Haller. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks, Gary.
And the council member from the Bronx's 18th Council District, it's Councilmember Amanda Farías. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Let's just get right to it. Ms. Haller, let's start with you. Let's go back a bit in history. Why was 21 in 21 so successful? That not only did you get 21 women elected, we're now up to 31 women elected, and that forms the current majority in the City Council. Why did it work?
Yeah, so an organization called Represent Women recently conducted research to answer exactly that question. Why did women win in 2021? And it's a dual path. There are two things that happened. It is the magical New York City that has term limits, some kind of public finance. Sorry, what's the third one?
It was ranked choice voting.
And ranked choice voting. That was what we wanted to talk about. Ranked choice voting, public finance, and term limits. But the other side of that coin is that there were on-the-ground organizations like 21 and 21, like Women of Color for Progress, and all sorts of other on-the-ground organizations supporting women, encouraging them to win, to run, mentoring them, and helping them get all the way. And it's only cities that have both of those things, the democratic reforms and the on-the-ground support, that are successful in achieving authentic representation. Is
there a change of mind in the mindset of voters? Or, I mean, because you define this in political terms, I'm always interested in what's going on out there. Is there something out there that maybe has changed or developed that made people say, well, I'll vote for this candidate instead of that candidate?
Yes, not only that, I think not only I will vote, but I want to prioritize. And ranked choice voting allows you to say, I want to prioritize women on my ballot. I want to prioritize women of color on my ballot. My district is mostly Latino or mostly Asian, and I want to prioritize that representation on my ballot.
And so as a result of that, you not only, people should know that's what ranked choice voting is. You not only vote for numero uno, you can move down the line and select, so those people get support as well. Very interesting. Council member, the whole thing really is governing, and the whole thing is policy. Have you seen policy shifts, policy changes as a result of having the women in the council? She's smiling, and so I'm sure the answer is yes.
I love this question. I do think that immediately we saw the effects of what a majority woman governing body or council looks like, right? In our first year, we've had several packages that not only impact and are prioritizing women's issues, but women and family issues, women and families aging in place, the future of our children and our communities. We're seeing this across the board. Our packages, our policies, our budgetary priorities have all shifted with a different mindset. And that mindset has actually been, what does the future of New York City look like? And how do we make sure that we're ensuring long-term changes for our families and New Yorkers?
You gave us some good generalities. Give us one specific of something that you were like, oh, wow, this might not have come up before, but now it's come up now.
Sure. I mean, we created an abortion access healthcare fund that is one of a kind in the nation, with $1 million that not only protects healthcare access and abortion access in New York City, but also for folks in other states that might not necessarily have access, to see New York as a safe haven and be able to get healthcare services. We've created childcare packages to lean us towards and move us towards universal childcare in New York City. We focused in on when we saw a dearth of access to baby formula, we pushed the mayor to actually open up the RFP process to fill our stores and shelves for families. There's been a plethora of things that we've done that focuses on the family in New York.
Let's stay on that just for a moment. There are, because there's many other aspects of this, there are more expectant and new young parents and mothers in the council themselves, so one would think firsthand they have a greater understanding of these things. Single moms who are the primary caregivers, et cetera, et cetera. But the Bronx and Brooklyn, and we'll get both of you to respond to this, have the highest rates of severe maternal morbidity, life-threatening conditions during pregnancy. What do you do about that? Now that it's a personal issue to more of the council members, what do you do about that, and where are we at? And you're next on the same question.
Sure. Yeah. So we actually answered directly to tackle that head on. We've invested more money and more policy services around doula services, around birthing initiatives within our boroughs, specifically in Brooklyn and the Bronx. And we've prioritized what does reporting look like. So we've amended some of this reporting mechanisms that we have in the city.
Reporting meaning keeping track of the data.
Yeah, DOH-MH reporting, right. That comes back to us so we can actually evaluate what's happening in real time versus in the past where we've seen where maybe more male-dominated councils have had 10-year backlog data that we were utilizing to address maternal health care, and specifically how Black maternal health care has been getting worse year after year. We now have updated reporting and updated data that's annual that we're reviewing to make sure that we're getting the services to the communities that are most in need.
You know, I'm just curious, and again, I'm going to get back to you about the about this issue, but because you said that male-dominated council might not have understood this. It's, you know, is it kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Is it because they just don't understand or it never occurred to them? I mean, I don't think that anybody would be mean about it, so to speak, or prejudiced about it. It's kind of an organic thing, I suppose, is the way to describe it.
I think at this table you might be the best person to answer that, but generally,
I would have to be told about the seriousness of it.
I do think that, you know, you do policy, you focus priority, yes, on community issues, but typically from your lens, right? So it's not to say that there aren't
Somebody
men.
was being evil about it.
Yeah, it's not to say that men are not focusing on women and children, but it is to say that they're not experiencing it on the day-to-day, right? It's not happening to them wholly all the time. And so when you do have more women in office, you do see just a change a bit of, yes, we're talking about ensuring healthcare access, but we're also talking about what does birthing experience look like and why are doula services necessary? Or we have a year-long plus usually on gynecological services for women. How do we open up those doors? Things like that
might not have been understood.
That might not understood.
So your point of view about, is this, let's say, a leading issue for the group? I mean, is this one of the things that you put right up at the top of the list?
Many of our candidates and the women that we've supported are elevating this issue in the council today, and even some of the candidates who I know are not in council, this was one of their leading issues. The new Majority NYC supports candidates who demonstrate support for our bottom line issues. One of the things we've been talking about, issues that feel like women's issues, childcare, healthcare, reproductive rights, but we feel really strongly that a whole host, economic development, standing up against bigotry against minority people, justice in all forms, are all support women, right? If you don't have economic development, it's the women that are going to suffer from that.
I want to talk about this unanimity, so to speak. Does this, and the issues that you mentioned and the issues that the council member mentioned kind of lean toward progressivism, if you will.
They do.
But as you know, 15 council members just left the Progressive Caucus, including Marjorie Velasquez and Diana Ayala, both have representation in the Bronx. The issue is over police accountability and funding. Does this hurt the ability for new Majority to lay out a platform?
New Majority NYC is nonpartisan. In 2021, the organization endorsed 74 candidates in 35 districts, including a Republican. We've had Republican applicants this time around. You can be Republican and still demonstrate support for building a resilient New York City, and which is one of our bottom line issues, and still be a Republican and demonstrate support for reproductive rights in some respect. So we're often lumped in as quote unquote a more progressive organization, but the range of values in the women reflect the demographics of the districts that we are working with the women in.
Councilmember, how do you feel about not only having your colleagues leave the Progressive Caucus, but even just let's digress a moment about this police funding issue, which is right in the center of the debate in the council right now?
Yeah, I think progressivism isn't a monolith, right? We each are elected by the body that's within the voting base that's within our communities, and we have to, be able to legislate and build budgetary priorities and communicate, really message our issues out to our local communities. And so, I think it's important for people to feel how they can best represent their community is how they can, do that through whatever caucus they're organizing out of. There are many caucuses in the council. We're a Democratic majority. There are other ways to organize outside of just caucuses. And in terms of the language that we have in Progressive Caucus about reducing the size and scope of the NYPD, the way I think majority of us view that is when we take examples in the PD budget, like moving traffic enforcement or school safety officers out of our schools and into the DOE, or out of traffic enforcement and into DOT, that's actually reducing the size and scope of the NYPD.
Without cutting a budget.
Well, it will actually cut budget as well, right? Because if we're moving whole divisions to other areas that are maybe more reflective of what they should be governing, it's actually streamlining the way that our precincts can focus in on the work that they need to do to keep our communities safe.
I guess ironically, just thinking back historically, that's what Rudy Giuliani did when he eliminated the MTA policing force and just made them regular city cops.
Exactly.
I want to ask you about another issue which is important to you folks, important, of course, to everybody in the Bronx, and that's the idea of universal pre-K and 3K. Yeah. The borough president just the other day put out something which was very interesting to me. She called serious concerns regarding the ongoing crisis affecting community-based early childhood education programs, saying that they get unequal pay, they provide more versatility in times of care because it's not as structured as the DOE early childhood programs, slow rates of reimbursement. That the kind of issue that you think belongs on the new majority platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's been an issue that a lot of the women have been raising already, and we'll
You've
see.
heard about that.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll see reflected, I think, in the races that are to come and in the prioritizing from organizations like the New Majority.
I have to say, talking about issues that are personal to you, I went to a school like that. My mom was a director of a school like that, so I'm very familiar with that situation. That's why I raised it. What about the whole notion of education equity? I was blown away a few years ago when it was said that the New York City school system was the most segregated in the country. Yeah. That blew my mind. Yeah. You want to talk about how we address that and how the new majority takes a view of education equity?
So, the new majority.
I want you to solve all our problems, if you don't mind.
This is how I'm going to solve the problems. We're going to support the women who are best qualified and most reflective of the city, and they're going to solve the problems. We're actually not an advocacy organization.
That's fair. Okay.
Right. We're not advocating for progressive or left or center. Mm-hmm. We are elevating the voices of the women who are in their communities the most experienced to be able to do that. I mean, my question on school segregation is, that is the fact. Is it a good fact or a bad fact? Right? Leave it to them to.
I don't know. Go ahead. She asked you the question. Why don't you answer?
Is it good or bad?
What do you think? I mean, how do we get equanimity in supports for different schools, public schools in our borough?
Well, I think it's great, first and foremost, that we have a woman leading on that charge as chair of the Education Committee, who really has been going community to community, school to school, coalescing and coalition building, not only with the other women of the council that are representing their communities, but with the men as well, to really focus in on some of these larger issues, the inequities that we're seeing in schools, whether that's needing additional after school programs, whether that's the busing issue that we're seeing, where we don't have air conditioning for some of our students, where we don't have enough access to getting students to and from school, looking at even hybrid, schooling right now and organizing that with the mayor. So I do think when we're focusing in on how to solve these inequities, what's happening now is what we're seeing from our chairwoman, in that we need to coalition build, and we need to show that whether it's in the Upper West Side or the South Bronx or in East New York, there are inequities that are happening across the board to our schools, and how do we solve those? And yes, I hope that means making sure our schools are more reflective of what our communities are.
It came up earlier in our conversation about business and economic development. We'll give you both a chance to respond. We'll let you, council member. We were just talking about a Castle Hill bid. That's a nice thing. I don't know if that's related directly to either your leadership or female leadership, but let's talk about economic development and how you think the new Majority NYC can affect the economic status of what has been a difficult problem in the Bronx.
Having as much support as we can, including from the new majority, and looking at elected leadership or the future leadership of New York City, is how we actually get to highlight and focus in on real solutions to impact our local economy. Women, women's issues are family issues. When women are not receiving the same rate of pay for the same work as men, that's impacting the family as a whole, and that's impacting our local economy and our local communities. And so I do think that having organizations that are backing more women, that can come to the table and say, we need wage equity, we need to focus in on a higher minimum wage. We need to focus in on how do we streamline apprenticeships and workforce development in communities, from young people up to upskilling adults into new fields, into new titles. That's really going to change the dynamic of our economy.
Just to continue to redefine or more closely define the theme of our program today, why again is that a woman's issue or something that new Majority NYC thinks about as opposed to in the past? Certainly, we've all been thinking about economic development.
Well, it's a women's issue because it's a family issue, and it's women we have more times than not are head of household and are taking care of an intergenerational household. So prioritizing for the women in the council, at least, or for women looking to lead in our communities, we are leading with wage equity. We are leading with issues around the economy because we are taking care of our households.
Ms. Haller, you just said a moment ago that we don't want to be an advocacy organization. Now, I'll give you some of the numbers. In 2020, women in the U.S. earned about 84% of what men earned. The council has passed laws aimed at addressing those gaps. The council passed a bill at the end of last session that requires salary ranges to be in all job postings. That's a good step forward. How do you not advocate for stuff that you think belong on the table?
So you caught me, because I think the first press conference I attended in their new session was about pay equity. And the council member called me up and said, "Can you be there?" And we said, "Absolutely."
Again, I don't know if this is better for the council member. We'll start with you. Are there laws that obviously equal pay makes total sense.
Yep.
Are we ready to move to another level of legislation, or is that a question for you, Councilman?
Well, that kind of advocacy is a stance we will take. Gladly, I will take stances on democratic reforms that open up voter access, that support ranked choice voting and term limits on public funds. That we will do because we know it'll lead to more authentic gender representation. As to next steps, I would point to my legislator.
I say anywhere that we can find spaces to create wage equity is important. I think the fight that Senator Jessica Ramos is doing to push for $21 or $22 of increasing the minimum wage is critical for us to keep this fight going for wage equity.
Advocates are pushing the mayor and council to support a 6.5% cost of living bill through. That's the kind of thing you would support?
Absolutely.
In a heartbeat?
In a heartbeat, for sure.
So now we've laid out the groundwork. We've talked about all the different issues. How do you sustain this? What do you do to keep all of this going I do want to ask about housing, but let's get to that first. And how do you keep this momentum? Because you've got some momentum. How do you keep it going?
So this is the hard part. The sexy work was hitting the number, was getting the 21 in 21,
31,
right?
yes.
An audacious goal and hitting it. And now it's the hard slog of saying, looking back 20 years from now and saying 2021 was the year we achieved gender parity, and we've kept it ever since. So how do I do it? I come out early with early endorsement. So that we are endorsing 27 women in 26 districts right now. That's going to be public, supporting women as they go into petitioning, helping get visibility for them, for the women who have demonstrated support for the bottom line issues. Also building a pipeline. One of the things we do is ask each candidate to promise or attempt to mentor women to pull up behind them.
One of the things that could come up, of course, in the Bronx, the primary is generally the bottom line. We're not making we never make judgments about elections and let people decide in the long term. But generally, and certainly in the Bronx, the primaries are the thing. You have two women running against each other. Does New Majority NYC support one of them? Or do you just say, well, we've got two women, one of them will move forward?
One of the reasons this organization was founded and why I came to take it over is because so many of the women's organizations in this country lean out in that moment. They will say to you, as they said to me when I ran, oh, there's more than one woman in your race. We can't get involved. But it's exactly leaning in, using ranked choice voting to say, here's our questionnaire, here are the bottom line issues. Which one of you is stronger and more appropriate for this district? Which one has the better path to victory? Perhaps we rank.
And I was going to say that in ranked choice voting, people, if they choose to, could do that.
So in the 21 election, we provided ballot guides so that voters knew how to rank the women, all of the women who applied and received endorsement in the district. This year, there is one open seat, and the organization is going to be ranking the women
one
who
open
applied.
seat.
District 43 in South Brooklyn.
Say,
not in the Bronx. Not in the Bronx.
We're
not
sorry. Very carefully. I was going, what did I miss?
In the whole city.
In the whole city.
In the whole city. Yeah.
You will endorse candidates between now and the time the program will air. We do record this a couple of days earlier. Yeah. You're going to make Councilmember Farías one of your endorsed candidates, right? Why don't you talk about that for a moment? And then we're going to quiz her about housing.
Great. The council member, not me.
Yes.
Yeah, Councilmember Farías is our first rank candidate in her district, District 18. She was last time around as well. And I
why?
believe
So
you were in
can,
2017.
You can sing her praises. She's sitting next to you. But why would she be the first one?
Why? Well, she clear demonstrated support of all the bottom line issues, clear path to victory, and has successfully executed everything that she's needed to do, including lifting up all of her women colleagues.
So in many ways, I think about the process of, let's say, getting the Bronx County organization to support a candidate. This is a similar kind of thing that they would, whether formally or informally, present to the New Majority NYC that I'm running. Would you endorse me? Is that
well,
where
there's
we're
a
at?
very formal process.
There's
a very formal process.
I'm an informal guy, but now I'm learning.
The informal part is we make sure, myself, our board, make sure that we are in contact with and identifying all of the women thinking about and potentially running, so that we ask them to get involved, to network them, to mentor them, so that they enter the pipeline, so to speak. So that's a lot of informal stuff going on there. Tentacles across the city. If she hears of someone, she'll send it to us. She'll send the person to us.
That's also, of course, if you get that kind of input, that's how you build an organization,
Correct.
of course, because everybody participates. I don't want to get away from this housing thing. Okay, affordable housing, it's a four-letter word. Everybody, they want it, they don't want it. The dialogue in the Bronx has become very difficult in many cases. Some cases there's been a vile dialogue about bringing, these people into our neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera. How can the New Majority NYC affect this incredibly volatile dialogue and deal with it? And I know you have a platform on it, but is this something that New Majority wants to undertake?
Yeah, when I think about how can the new majority, how can organizations throughout this city support the efforts towards our housing dilemma that we have, the housing crisis that we have, having a set in stone platform like the new majority has that says, that has a long list of items that we have to commit to, or at least for maybe new candidates think about, okay, this is maybe the first time I'm seeing this. How do I shape where my values are? How does my community think about that? That really is a major part of, or defining moments for women, for candidates in the city to say, I'm about to take on this large job, and part of this involves how my community is going to relate to my decision making, or our co-governance model that's created, or new development that comes in with or without us, right? Private properties sometimes can just develop. And having an organization that says, we have a list of values, principles, pushing your moral code a bit and saying, how are you going to govern? And how can you govern within these defined principles?
Before we run out of time, just curious, because you're very visible in your community, obviously. Do you get pushback? Are there people, I hate to say, are there men? Are there people who say, you know what, we're tired of seeing this, we should do it the old traditional way? Do you see any pushback? Or is it generally endorsed by, in general, people of the Bronx?
I'm consistently getting positive feedback and constructive criticism about things.
Boy, am I dying to ask you what one of those was.
But I think that's healthy, right? We want communities that have differing opinions, that are diverse, that come from different backgrounds, that can say, hey, why did you vote on this, or why are you bringing this project in? And it's my responsibility, my core responsibility, to ensure that I'm messaging that right, communicating that well, and also being able to bring those folks on board with where we're going, or where we need to be as a community.
Jessica Haller, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
People can find you on the web, New Majority NYC.
NewMajorityNYC.org.
There you go. Councilmember, continued good luck. Let's keep building the Bronx together. That's what we want to do.
Thank you.
Folks, we want to thank our producer, Rebecca Hemick. Our director is Nick Marrero. Thanks to the cast of thousands around us here working with us in the studio. Next week, a very special show. Not that all our shows aren't special. As we will come directly to you from the Bronx Museum of Art and the incredible Bronx sculptured in an exhibit called Swagger and Tenderness, the South Bronx Portraits by John Ahern and Rigoberto Torres. I can guarantee you it will be a show that will blow your mind in its representation of the people of the Bronx, which you will appreciate. We'll see you then. Good night.